So let's get right into the story. It was June 4th, 2005. For days, the sound of church bells echoed through the quiet hills of Romania. Gregorian chants reverberated off ancient stone walls, and in the shadows of a crumbling monastery, someone screamed. Not in pain, but in terror. They cried out for mercy, for help, for release. But their pleas were lost in the smoke of incense and the rhythmic sway of the faithful. Inside a locked room, a young nun sat bound to a cross. Her name was Marica Cornici, and she had become the focus of a terrifying battle. A fight between God and the devil, where her very soul hung in the balance, and the rules were bent until there was no turning back. What happened next would shock the country and the world. So let's find out exactly what happened in the Tanacu Exorcism. So first, let's find out who was Marica Cornici. Marica Cornici was a 23-year-old orphan. When she entered the Tanacu Monastery in the hills of western Romania in early 2005, she hoped to find peace. Tucked away in a valley, the monastery was home to about a dozen nuns who lived cloistered away from the world. Marica had been drawn to the church for some time. She'd heard rumors of miraculous healings and divine interventions that occurred within its hallowed halls. Although she'd had no particular visions or revelations, something about the prospect of religious life appealed to her. During her brief time at the monastery, she was described as being quiet, obedient, and devout. She seemed like an ideal candidate for the secluded lifestyle. However, after a few months, witnesses began to notice strange behavior in the young nun. Sister Cornelia was accused of laughing uncontrollably during prayer, hearing voices when no one was around, and claiming that Satan himself was speaking to her. These incidents alarmed the nuns, who saw them as signs of a troubled spirit. And deeply orthodox priest, known for his staunch traditionalism and fierce opposition to modern innovations in the church. They believed that Maria had become mentally unstable, perhaps due to a past psychological diagnosis. While working in Germany as a caregiver, she'd been declared schizophrenic, a fact she kept secret from the other sisters. But this diagnosis did little to ease their fears, as stories of demonic possessions were commonplace in Romanian folklore. As the rumors spread throughout the monastery, one name came to mind: Daniel Petru Corogianu. With this diagnosis, he dismissed any need for medical treatment, and instead, he began planning her isolation. To him, the only explanation for Maria's erratic behavior was possession by demons. He was also the spiritual leader of Tanacu, having attracted many followers with his promise of a more authentic form of Christianity. Now, as the sisters grappled with the possibility of a demonic presence among them, they turned to him for help. When he arrived at the monastery, Father Corogianu wasted no time in diagnosing the source of Marica's problems. He claimed that she was suffering from demonic possession, not mental illness. Father Corogianu believed that psychiatry was inferior to spiritual warfare, and that science could not explain the complex realities of the supernatural. This conclusion was reinforced by the nun's own claims that Satan was speaking to her and whispering temptations in her ear. However, others argue that these claims were likely a product of her schizophrenia rather than actual demonic influence. Nevertheless, Father Corogianu was convinced that he was facing a serious case of possession, and that only an exorcism could save Marica. With the support of the other nuns, he began his plan of action. First, he cut off her contact with the outside world, forbidding anyone from delivering letters or messages from the outside. Then he subjected her to daily prayers, fasting, and sleep deprivation in an attempt to weaken the demon's hold over her. It was as if they were playing a deadly game of spiritual chess, with Maria's life hanging in the balance. But then, as the intensity of the isolation increased, so did the frequency and severity of her breakdowns. According to the priest and the nuns, she became violent, thrashing about in her bed and foaming at the mouth. She began speaking in different voices, some guttural and demonic, others high-pitched and childlike. She claimed to be two people, one good and one evil, constantly battling for control over her. On June 2005, after weeks of preparation, the exorcism began. For 3 days, Mariska was bound, gagged, and left without food or water. She was left without food or water, forced to endure the physical discomfort and pain of her bindings. Her wrists and ankles were tied together with rope and then secured to a large wooden cross. A leather strap was placed over her mouth to silence what they believed was the voice of the demon. All this was done in the name of saving her soul, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mariska stopped moving, but her pleas went unheard, lost in the fervor of the exorcism. She was kept in a small room with a flickering candle for light, the air thick with the scent of incense and damp cloth. From time to time, Father Corogianu and the nuns would enter the room and perform prayers and rituals over her, chanting in Latin and Romanian. Her skin was dry and cracked, her eyes hollow and staring. They believed that by doing this, they were weakening the demon and preparing her for deliverance. However, all the while, Mariska was struggling to survive. The media quickly picked up on the story, dubbing it the crucifixion at Tanacu. Yet she wasn't alone. The room was always filled with the sounds of chanting and the smell of burning incense. There was also the sound of whispers, voices she heard, but no one else seemed to, calling out to her, trying to comfort her. Medical examiners confirmed that her death resulted from dehydration and exhaustion. Despite her ordeal, she continued to call out for help, crying out for Jesus, for mercy, for salvation. But as the third day wore on, something terrible happened. On June 2005, after 3 days of isolation and mistreatment, Mariska Kornici died. By the time the nuns discovered that her pulse was faint, it was too late. She had succumbed to a combination of dehydration, exhaustion, and asphyxiation brought on by the leather strap that had been tied tightly over her mouth. When they untied the leather strap, they found that her tongue was swollen and bruised from constant biting. As news of Mariska's death spread, public outrage grew. People took to the streets demanding justice for the young nun. Was this a case of blind, misguided faith gone wrong? Or was it a calculated act of religious extremism? The tragedy raises haunting questions about the nature of faith, the limits of religious devotion, and the fine line between piety and fanaticism. Protesters carried signs reading, "Do and torture in the name of God," and "Murder in the name of religion." Amidst the chaos, 4 nuns and Father Corogianu were arrested. The investigation that followed revealed shocking details about what had transpired at the monastery. Eyewitnesses recounted how Mariska had been denied food and water during the exorcism. However, despite the overwhelming evidence against them, Father Corogianu and the nuns refused to accept responsibility for their actions. The priest claimed that he was fighting the devil and winning, while the nuns insisted that they were following orders. The trial that ensued was highly publicized and emotionally charged, dividing public opinion and bringing the dark side of religious fundamentalism into the spotlight. After 8 months, Father Corogianu was convicted of abusing his authority and sentenced to 7 years in prison. The 4 nuns received slightly lesser sentences, ranging from 5 to 6 years. Meanwhile, the Romanian Orthodox Church distanced itself from the incident, claiming that the monastery was operating without full approval from the Holy Synod, which governs the Church in Romania. In the end, the tragedy raised more questions than it answered. Now, did she have schizophrenia, or was she possessed? Was she ill, or was she truly the subject of a demonic possession? Today, the monastery stands abandoned, a silent testament to the darkness that can sometimes lurk beneath the cloak of spirituality. Those who visit report a heavy atmosphere, as if the walls themselves are weighed down by the tragedy that unfolded within them. Some have even claimed to hear whispering voices, feel cold drafts, and experience a sense of pressure in their chests. Whether one believes in the paranormal or not, The story of Marisica Cornici serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked religious zeal and the importance of treating those who suffer from mental illness with compassion and understanding. And now let me ask you, what do you think happened to Marisica Cornici?